Hi.
Hi, guys.
You haven't seen us for a couple weeks, 2 weeks maybe, 1 week, I don't know. But anyway, this is the Simplicity channel, TEA. Let me move a little closer. We talk about things on the internet nobody else wants to talk about, but today it's not one of those videos. Today it's a fun one. Last week, or whatever week it was, we talked about MLM, scams, and marketing, which was all Tory. I knew nothing about that. This week, we're going to be diving into what a lot of people seem to be interested in these days as well, which is psychology. That's all me.
Yeah, that's her for
I know everything about that. We have a lot to get through, so we're going to start, and, oh wait, we need to do the cheers. My bad.
Yeah.
My bad. Let's dive into the tea. Cheers, you know, because this is a lot of tea.
I have a big gulp from 7-Eleven.
So, before we can even really talk about psychology itself, we need a definition of psychology. This comes from Oxford Languages of this year, and it's the scientific study of the human mind and its functions, especially those affecting behavior in a given context. That basically just means the study of human behavior. That's it. That's all psychology.
That's really complicated.
Yeah. So, first we're going to talk about Sigmund Freud. Now, this all comes from my Theories of Personality 11th edition textbook that came out in 2017. So all of this is from a textbook. But Sigmund Freud, he's the father of psychoanalysis, not psych overall. I know a lot of people think he's psych overall. No, he's just psychoanalysis, even though he did no analysis whatsoever. You're going to be able to tell my opinion of Freud pretty quickly.
Yeah, I was going to say what it is, but
yeah.
you'll figure it out.
So there's something called the cocaine episode from this textbook, and I want to read it to you. While in medical school, Freud began to experiment with cocaine, which at that time was not an illegal substance. He took the drug himself and persuaded his fiancée, sisters, and friends to try it. Freud called cocaine a miracle drug and claimed it eased his depression and chronic indigestion. He continued to use cocaine to make bad days good and good days better. Cocaine thrilled him in a manner that everyday life could not. He wrote romantic, often erotic letters to his fiancée and dreamed grandiose dreams of his future career. In 1884, he published an article about cocaine's beneficial effects, thinking it would make him famous, but that was not to be. This article was later judged to be a major contributor to the epidemic of cocaine use, which swept over Europe and the United States, lasting well into the 1920s. Freud was strongly criticized for his part in unleashing, there's another picture, hold on, in unleashing the cocaine plague. The publicity later brought him infamy rather than fame, and for the rest of his life, he tried to erase his earlier endorsements of cocaine, deleting all references to it from his own bibliography. However, he continued to use cocaine well into middle age. He apparently took it from 1884 to 1896, and then switched to wine. In June 1899, he wrote to a friend, "I'm gradually becoming accustomed to the wine. It seems like an old friend. I plan to drink a lot of it in July."
Sir, you're an addict.
That's all I needed my computer for. But yes, so that's what I wanted to read to you. I hope to have it printed out, but my printer, because it was out of color ink, it was not having it, and I was like, I just need this in black and white, but it still wasn't having it. So I just wanted to read that to you to know a little bit about Freud as a person. So there are some things I want to say on the side. When we get to Erik Erikson, I'll go more into detail about this, but if someone didn't agree with Freud, he would cut them out of his life.
Was that the one you were talking about in the car?
Yes.
Okay.
He basically thought that he was right, and so if anybody disagreed with him, they were wrong.
Narcissist.
He coined that we should talk about our problems, but was wrong about everything else. So, now let's jump into things. He studied under a woman, Jeanne Martin. She's a French woman, so I'm not even going to try to say the last name, because I'm going to butcher it.
Let me see it.
Charcot? I don't even know.
Yeah, Charcot.
Charcot. Who's a psychiatrist. She was apparently called a pioneer in the use of hypnosis. He heard her say to a patient, "In this sort of case, it's always a question of the genitals. Always, always, always." I wouldn't trust anybody that says that. Unless they are a sex therapist, don't trust anybody that says that.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about that.
So Freud proposed that certain things that happen in men, big doctor words, resulted from masturbation, and anxiety neurosis arose from abnormal sexual practices such as abstinence. Freud's theory of actual neurosis is thus a theory of his own neurotic symptoms.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me.
This man... Okay, we're going to move on from that. He had two types of instincts listed. So there are things called life instincts. They serve the purpose of survival and the species by seeking to satisfy the needs for food, water, air, and sex. You need these things, apparently.
I'm doing just fine.
You do need food.
Y'all.
You do need food.
Yeah,
you do need water.
Yes.
You do need air.
Yes, I do.
You don't need sex.
Yeah, no, I'm like totally.
Sex
chilling.
is awful for me. Anyway.
Yeah, that will.
So
I would say we'll get into that. We won't. But
the key concept is libido. You guys probably know what libido is, but he said it was the form of psychic energy manifested by the life instincts that drives a person towards pleasurable behaviors and thoughts. Meaning that this drives people to do things that are pleasurable. That's literally all it means.
All right, then.
So there's this word that I can't even hope to pronounce, but it's an investment of psychic energy in an object or person. So, for example, Freud would say if you like your roommate, he would say your libido is basically connected to that person. So, let's say that Tori was living with me, right? Let's say she had a crush on me. It would never happen, but let's just say she did, right? Basically, her libido, so her pleasurable behaviors and thoughts would be then connected to me because she likes me.
No,
that's not how that works.
No.
His other instinct...
We have very different types, y'all. Just
his
FYI.
other instincts were death instincts, or destructive instincts. The unconscious drive towards decay, destruction, and aggression is what that is. One aspect is the aggressive drive, the compulsion to destroy, conquer, and kill. He believed humans have an unconscious wish to die.
Okay, well that's concerning.
Yeah. So the levels of personality, this is really going to interest you guys. So he said the conscious was the tip of the iceberg, what we're currently thinking. The preconscious is the storehouse for memories, and the unconscious is the part under the water, the stuff we don't think about but are there. So think of an iceberg. The part that's above the water is what you're thinking about. The preconscious right below the water is where your memories are, and the unconscious is the very deep, deep in the water that you don't think about.
All right, then.
The conscious is our contact with the outside world. Our preconscious is material just beneath the surface of awareness, and our unconscious is difficult to retrieve material well below the surface of awareness. This usually comes out in your dreams. You know, unconscious desires in your dreams? That's what comes from your unconscious.
See,
it's the stuff that's there, but you're not thinking about when you're conscious.
See, I agree with that, to be honest with you.
So then he had his pleasure principles, and I'm going to give examples for each of these. So id is the pleasure principle, the primary process thinking, the part that if you want something, you take it. Let's say Tori had a Hershey's bar with her.
Actually, I do somewhere.
Well, okay, let me take one of her bracelets, okay? Yeah. So let's say Tori had this bracelet and I want it. It's sitting there. I'd be like, the id goes, oh, I want it. You just take it.
Yes.
That's what the id is. That's when you're a baby. You do what you want in the moment.
Yep, that's true.
The ego, reality principle, secondary process thinking. Choices come with consequences. The reality of a situation. It's like, I want to take this bracelet, but I shouldn't because it's bad. I shouldn't do that. It's hers. The super ego. Where's the bracelet?
I got it. Sorry.
Super ego. Moral imperatives, conscious formed in this stage. So I'm not going to even think about taking it because my conscious is telling me that's not a good thing to do. So the conscious is when you're like, you don't even think about it. You're going to push it out. You don't want to even think about that. So Freud had some views on anxiety. He said anxiety was a feeling of fear and dread without an obvious cause. Pretty much on the nose with that one. He had different types of anxiety. Reality anxiety, a fear of tangible dangers.
Okay, listen.
Yeah. Neurotic anxiety involves a conflict between id and ego. So the conflict between instinctual gratification and reality, which not many people go through that one.
Yeah, I don't think I have.
Moral anxiety involves a conflict between id and superego. So that means that I want this and the conscious telling you no. Defenses against anxiety. He says we do a couple defenses against anxiety. One is repression. Involves unconscious denial of the existence of something that causes anxiety. I do that a lot.
Yeah, you do.
Denial involves denying the existence of an external threat or traumatic event. Reaction formation involves expressing an id impulse that is the opposite of the one truly driving the person. So that means, let's say I have an id impulse to fuck my boyfriend on the kitchen floor. That's the first thing that popped into my head. I hope he doesn't watch this video. But let's say let's say that I had that id impulse. I would choose one that is the opposite of that one. Because I'd have anxiety about it. I don't know. Projection involves attributing a disturbing impulse to someone else. You guys know what projection is.
Yeah,
let's say I come home and I'm angry, I start screaming at her. I'm projecting my anger onto her. I've done it to Kelly many times and I've apologized for it now.
Yeah.
Regression involves retreating to an earlier, less frustrating period of life and displaying the childish and dependent behaviors, characteristic of that more secure time. So this would be like what I've been doing recently, which is really bad, but I've been going back to high school when having a job wasn't a constant need for it. I'm not displaying the behaviors because I have matured, but I'm going back to that time to feel more secure in my life, which is really bad. I need to stop doing that. But rationalization involves reinterpreting behavior to make it more acceptable and less threatening. I think we kind of actually should all do that. Mm-hmm. Reinterpreting. Anyway. So, and then we have two more. Displacement involves shifting id impulses from a threatening or unavailable object to a substitute object that is available. That you guys know.
Yeah, that
shifting.
that one's self-explanatory.
Sublimation involves altering or displacing id impulses by diverting instinctual energy into socially acceptable behaviors. So it's literally just id impulses by making them into socially acceptable behaviors. So this is the last bit of Freud, but we have to talk about his psychosexual stages of development. We can't, that is Freud. Mm-hmm. So there's an oral stage. It goes from birth to 1 year old. Mouth is the primary erogenous zone. Pleasure derived from sucking. It is dominant. This is his actual writing. This is not me. This is what he actually says.
We're going to ignore the fact that I'm drinking out of a straw as you said that.
Anal, 1 to 3. Toilet training. External reality. Interferes with gratification received from defecation. If you don't know what defecation means, that's pooping. That's what that word means.
Hence my reaction.
Phallic, ages 4 to 5. Incestuous fantasies, Oedipus complex, anxiety, and superego development.
Alright. See, I know what these are, I've just never heard it put that way.
Latency, age 5 to puberty, period of sublimation of sex instinct. So you know that means turning that wanting to have sex into something socially acceptable. Genital, adolescence to adulthood, development of sex role identity and adult social relationships. So that just means your relationships with people, you're developing that.
Yeah.
So he coined something called penis envy, where a woman believes she lost her penis.
Not this.
She views success as having a penis. No.
Wrong.
No.
Wrong.
That we also want to have sex with parents of the opposite sex.
Wrong.
So in boys, the mother takes care of every need. You know, like as a baby, your mother took care of your every need. So they feel the mother could take care of the sexual feelings too. No.
Yeah, wrong.
No. When, like when they're a baby, the mother takes care of everything. So here I'm going to say he worked with mostly young boys. So I coined a joke. And my joke is, he's a pedo with a lot of files.
funny every time.
If you understand what that is, gold star for you on today's lesson.
Another one I've heard people use is a PDF file because of YouTube.
Yeah, that's
another one.
He definitely is. Anyway, he's not alive anymore, so it's not like anybody could tag him in this. Anyway.
Can you imagine if he had social media?
Oh my
God.
Carl Jung, who studied under Freud. Let's see how different it was. He said that psychic energy to him, it was the basis of his system. So he said libido was a broader and more generalized form of psychic energy. We're still here with the psychic energy. I don't understand that. Freud's term for personality was psyche. So he didn't say personality, he said your psyche, which kind of makes sense. He had two principles of psychic energy. The opposition principle was his idea that conflict between opposing processes or tendencies is necessary to generate psychic energy. Do you know what that means? It's okay, I'll tell you. Like heat versus cold, and height versus depth. You know, people have these really scientific descriptions when it's really just as easy as heat versus cold and height versus depth. That's what that opposition principle is. Just things that are opposing each other. Equivalence principle, the continuing redistribution of energy within a personality. If the energy expended on certain conditions or activities weakens or disappears, that energy is transferred elsewhere in the personality. Does that make sense? No. Here's what makes sense. Let's say Tori lost interest in someone she liked.
Happened recently, I'm not gonna lie.
She moved her energy invested in him to a new person. That's what that means. So it's also...
Myself.
So, entropy principle. I didn't know there was a third one down here. My bad. Entropy principle. A tendency towards balance or equilibrium within the personality. The ideal is an equal distribution of psychic energy over all structures of the personality. That means if a hot object and a cold object are placed in direct contact, heat will flow to the colder object until each object is equal. That's all that means, literally. My examples will help you more than the actual descriptions. So he said the ego was the center of consciousness. It does perceiving, thinking, feeling, remembering, and it helps with everyday life. He coined extroversion and introversion. He said that extroverted thinking is logical and dogmatic. Extroverted feeling is emotional, sensitive, sociable, more typical in women than men. Extroverted sensing, outgoing, pleasure-seeking, adaptable. Extroverted intuitioning, creative, able to motivate others and to seize opportunities. You kind of get this, right? Like extroverted, very out there. Introverted thinking, more interested in ideas than people. Introverted feeling, reserved, undemonstrative, yet capable of deep emotion. Introverted sensing, outwardly detached, expressing themselves in aesthetic pursuits. Introverted intuitioning, concerned with the unconscious more than everyday reality. So basically, if you're an extrovert or an introvert, one of those probably connected to you and how you feel. Personal unconscious, the reservoir of material that was once conscious but has been forgotten or suppressed. A complex is a core or pattern of emotions, memories, perceptions, and wishes in the personal unconscious, organized around a common theme, such as power of status. So for a complex, Tori might try to become powerful by running for elective office if she has a superiority complex.
I don't, but I know who does.
Collective unconscious. Basically, all of our ancestors' experiences are in us and guide our decisions. That's what he said about our collective unconscious. So, the example is our primitive past becomes the basis of the human psyche, directing and influencing our present behavior. So let's say our ancestors went through something, that would guide our behavior now. Their experiences. That was Billy.
Yep.
Archetypes, images of universal experiences contained in the collective unconscious. You guys will know these archetypes. The persona archetype, the public face, or the face a person presents to others. Animus, masculine aspects of the female psyche. Anima, feminine aspects of the male psyche. The shadow archetype, the dark side of the personality, the archetype that contains primitive animal instincts. The self archetype, The archetype that represents the unity, integration, and harmony of the total personality. And because we're not going through everything about these people, also do your own research if you want to know more about a certain person. But only 3 developmental stages, he said. Childhood, reflection of parents' personalities, focus on achieving goals. Puberty to young adulthood. At this point, we focus on achieving goals. I'm sorry, not in childhood. In puberty we do, to young adulthood. Middle age, focus and interest change. That's when a midlife crisis can happen. Not everybody has one. On to Alfred Adler. Individual psych. We will get a lot less now at this point, so be ready for that. So he said that there's an inferiority complex and superiority complex. We talked about that with Tory running for office. Characteristics of birth order. So the inferiority complex, a condition that develops when a person is unable to compensate for normal inferiority feelings. You want to be able to, you can't compensate with what you have, but you want to. Superiority complex, striving for perfection, running for office, wanting to seem very perfect to everybody on the outside. So here are the characteristics of a firstborn. If you're a firstborn, you're oriented toward the past, locked in nostalgia, and pessimistic about the future. Characteristics of secondborn. Optimistic about future, likely to be competitive and ambitious, and wants to one-up older sibling. I could tell you being a secondborn, that is not me at all. Youngest born. Adler says they're often high achievers in whatever work they undertake as adults. That's bullshit too, because I'm also the youngest. That's bullshit. Anyway, the only child. He says they spend more time in the company of adults than children. Yeah. They often mature early. Mm-hmm. And they manifest adult behaviors and attitudes.
Yeah, I did that.
So that's all about Adler. Now we're on to Karen Horney. She's the only woman theorist on this list. She talked about neurotic needs and trends. She said women don't have penis envy.
Thank you, Queen.
She said it in an article making fun of Freud. She was always trolling the hell out of Freud. So she talked about the childhood need for safety and security, neurotic needs, and the feminine psyche. So the childhood need for safety and security. She said it's a higher level needed for security and freedom from fear, obviously. So here are the 10 neurotic needs. Affection and approval, a dominant partner, power, exploitation, prestige, admiration, achievement or ambition, self-sufficiency, perfection, and narrow limits to life. Here was her feminine psychology. She said there was such a thing called womb envy. Listen to this. The envy in which a man feels towards a female because she can bear children and he cannot. Do you think this is true? Let me tell you why it's not. Womb envy was Horney's response to Freud's concept of penis envy in females. She wasn't saying this was actually an envy men have. Mm-hmm. She was poking fun at Freud. She also has the flight from womanhood, feelings of inferiority in women, fantasies focus on vaginal injury, and the pain of forcible penetration, the unconscious desire to have a child, and the fear of intercourse. Which actually, I've had that before. So don't even come for me, because I've had that before. She did have something to say about the Oedipus complex. She doesn't agree with Freud. And then the womb envy versus the penis envy thing is connected there. So, yeah. So, Queen. We love her. Now we're on to Erik Erikson, which identity theory, which I said I was going to bring up that Freud thing. Here's the explanation. Freud hated him, but had to be nice because his daughter was friends with Erik Erikson.
That's funny.
So Anna Freud.
That's funny.
Yeah. So his identity theory was psychosocial stages of personality development, basic strengths, and basic weaknesses. So he had 8 successive stages encompassing the lifespan. So, birth to 1 year old is trust versus mistrust. And the strength is hope. Ages 1 to 3. Autonomy versus doubt and shame. The strength is will. 3 to 5. Initiative. I'm sorry, I forgot how to say that word for a second. Initiative versus guilt. The strength is purpose. Industriousness versus inferiority for 6 to 11. The strength is competence. 12 to 18. Identity cohesion versus role confusion. The strength is fidelity. Ages 18 to 35, intimacy versus isolation. The strength is love. So that's young adulthood. 35 to 55, generativity versus stagnation. The strength is care. And 55 plus years, ego, integrity versus despair. And the strength is wisdom. So those were just a little bit about him, but his basic weaknesses were motivating characteristics that derive from the unsatisfactory resolution of developmental crises. That just means characteristics that derive from unsatisfactory resolution of finishing the developmental stages. Maldevelopment is something he also found, which was a condition that occurs when the ego consists solely of a single way of coping with conflict. That's pretty self-explanatory. Gordon Allport, this is a new guy. He was motivation and personality. He talked about personality traits and personality development in childhood, which he called the unique self. So, nature of personality. He reviewed some 50 definitions of personality before coming up with his own. You want to hear what his definition of personality that he came up with? Personality is the dynamic organization within the individual of those psychophysical systems that determine characteristic behavior and thought. This means that personality is the organization within yourself of systems that characterize behavior and thought. That's literally all that he was saying. It just sounds bigger. He had 5 personality traits. Or 5 things about personality traits. His personality traits, that they're real and exist within each of us. They're not theoretical constructs or labels made up to account for behavior. Traits determine or cause behavior. They don't arise only in response to certain stimuli. They motivate us to seek appropriate stimuli, and they interact with the environment to produce behavior. Traits can be demonstrated empirically by observing behavior over time. We can infer the existence of traits and the consistency of a person's responses to the same or similar stimuli. Traits are interrelated. They may overlap, even though they represent different characteristics. For example, aggressiveness and hostility are distinct but related traits and are frequently observed to occur together in a person's behavior. And traits vary with the situation. For example, a person may display the trait of neatness in one situation and the trait of disorderliness in another situation. He had 7 stages of development of the proprietum, so you can look that up on your own time because it's boring as hell. Trust me, some things, and like these next guys, oh, we're going to go through this so fast. You know why? Raymond Cattell. This is where we get into factor analysis. Who wants to hear me talk about a statistical technique based on correlations between several measures which may be explained in terms of underlying factors?
I feel like I'm in a science class.
Nobody wants to hear me talk about that. So that was Raymond Cattell. Heinz Eisnick was 3 dimensions of personality. E, extroversion versus introversion. N, neuroticism versus emotional stability. And P, psychoticism versus impulse control. That's all you need to know about him. The 5-factor theory was made up by McCrae and Costa's factors. They looked at neuroticism, extroversion, openness, agreeableness, and conscientiousness. Okay, I wanted to make sure. Yeah, okay. So there was also a model made by Ashton and Lee, and they had the factors and the descriptions. So honesty and humility, the descriptions was sincere, honest, faithful versus greedy, pretentious, hypocritical, boastful. Emotionality was said to be emotional, oversensitive, faithful, anxious versus brave, tough, self-assured, stable. Extroversion, outgoing, lively, sociable, cheerful versus shy, passive, withdrawn, reserved. Agreeableness, tolerant, peaceful, gentle. Agreeable versus quarrelsome, stubborn, and ill-tempered. Conscientiousness, disciplined. Diligent through precise versus reckless, lazy, irresponsible, absent-minded. Openness to experience, creative, innovative, unconventional versus shallow, conventional, unimaginative, on and on. The last thing I'm going to talk about in this type of thing is the dark triad of personality. So, Paulus and Kevin Williams came up with this. The dark triads are narcissism, extreme selfishness, an inflated sense of one's abilities and talents, and the constant need for admiration and attention. Machiavellianism. I think I said that right. Machiavellianism. Yeah, that thing that I can't say for some reason. The need to manipulate others, characterized by cunning, deceit, and unscrupulous behaviors. And psychopathy. Callous, insensitive, egocentric, antisocial, takes advantage of other people using great charm and often violence. Abraham Maslow. You've probably heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Yeah. Here's his hierarchy. Need for self-actualization, esteem needs from self and others, belongingness and love needs, safety needs, security, order, and stability, physiological needs, food, water, and sex. Again with the sex. He also had something called the Jonah complex. The fear that maximizing our potential will lead to a situation with which we will be unable to cope. Jonah from the Bible, by the way, if you want to know where that came from. Jonah who got swallowed by the whale. Yeah, that guy. So Carl Rogers had a self-actualizing theory, and he talked about self and tendency towards actualization, development of self in childhood, and characteristics of fully functioning persons. His actualization tendency was known as the basic human motivation to actualize, maintain, and enhance the self. His orgasmic valuing process, the process by which we judge experiences in terms of their value for fostering or hindering our actualization and growth. Development of self in childhood, positive regard, acceptance, love, and approval from others. Unconditional positive regard is approval granted regardless of a person's behavior. In Rogers' person-centered therapy, the therapist offers the client unconditional positive regard. Positive self-regard, the condition under which we grant ourselves acceptance and approval. So he did have, a lot of things, and I wrote down things because, I didn't know what would be interesting, but I'll read to you the characteristics of fully functioning persons. Awareness of all experience, open to positive as well as negative feelings, freshness of appreciation for all experiences, trust in one's own behavior and feelings, freedom of choice without inhibitions, creativity and spontaneity, continual need to grow, the strive to maximize one's potential in a state of actualizing. I thought there was something on the screen. That's the background. Okay. Chapter 13 is last. We're on chapter 11. See how fast I told you we were going to go through these? George Kelly, Personal Construct Theory. His personal construct theory and the ways of anticipating life's events. His theory, he suggested that people perceive and organize their world of experiences the same way scientists do, by formulating hypotheses about the environment and testing them against the reality of daily life. Basically, making a choice and then testing to see if it's going to be a good idea. That's all it is. The 11 ways of anticipating life's events. This is a lot, guys. He said because repeated events are similar, we can predict or anticipate how we'll experience such an event in the future. He said that individual differences in interpreting events, like people perceive events in different ways. We arrange our constructs and patterns according to our view of their similarities and differences. Constructs are bipolar. For example, if we have an opinion about honesty, that idea must also include the concept of dishonesty. We choose the alternative for each construct that works best for us, the one that allows us to predict the outcome of anticipated events. Our constructs may apply to many situations or people, or may be limited to a simple person or situation, and there are more, but, we don't have the time for all that. Here's one you may have heard of. B.F. Skinner, reinforcement theory. Positive and negative reinforcement. He said reinforcement was the basis of behavior. Respondent behavior was responses made to or elicited by specific environmental stimuli. Operant behavior was behavior admitted spontaneously or voluntarily that operates on the environment to change it. Reinforcement, you guys know what reinforcement is. I don't need to read the definition. Positive reinforcement. If a kid does the dishes like you ask, you give them candy, so they're more likely to do it to get the same outcome. That was Skinner. He coined positive and negative reinforcement. Negative reinforcement. You let a kid have a tablet at night, and they didn't behave well, so they get it taken away. Positive and negative reinforcement. That's all that Skinner did with the mice and rats. That's it. Albert Bandura, modeling theory, Bobo doll study. That's all we need to talk about with him. His findings. Kids that saw an adult play nicely with the doll played with it nicely. Kids that saw adults not pay attention to the doll paid it no mind. Kids that saw the adult act aggressive towards the doll were found to be twice as aggressive to the doll.
Billy.
I know. Okay, we have 2 more studies and then one more thing to say and we're done. Pavlov dog's conditioning study. Ivan Pavlov rang a bell. Billy.
Little face.
Rang a bell each time he fed the dogs. Dogs learned to associate the bell with food. Dogs would salivate when they heard the bell, even if there was no food. Dogs would salivate when they heard the assistant's footsteps as well. His style found classical conditioning. Not proved, you can't say proved. Found classical conditioning. That source was AI Overview for an overview of it. But anyway, classical conditioning, a learning process in which a neutral stimulus is paired with a stimulus that elicits a natural response or reflex, creating an automatic conditioned response to the neutral stimuli. That's from thedecisionlab.com. Example, I tell Tori to grab the pen. She does. She gets shocked every time she grabs the pen.
God damn.
So if I were to hand her a pen, not in that context, she would be scared to grab it because she's scared she's going to get shocked. That's what conditioning is. Last study. And I hate this study, but it's important to talk about it. It's called the Stanford Prison Experiment.
Oh, God, I hate it.
Demonstrated how social roles and situational factors can influence human behavior. The experiment showed that ordinary people can be transformed into perpetrators of evil. It was done in 1971. The reason we have strict ethical rules now is because of this study.
Yeah.
Billy, calm.
Yeah, I know I have watched a lot of stuff about the Stanford Prison Experiment. It is so unbelievably dark, but fascinating. And there's a lot of, like, videos and stuff about it. So I would, if you're interested in that and want to know something that's, like, true crimey, really scary, but, like, just fascinating, look into that. I'm
obviously just telling you the
this is just the very brief, the trauma or anything discussed at all.
There were 24 male college students split up into guards and prisoners. The guards became cruel and sadistic, and the prisoners became depressed and hopeless. The study was planned to be for 2 weeks, but only lasted 6 days. So that's the AI overview on the internet when you first search it up.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Now I'm just going to tell you a couple things that I think are very important to talk about. This is the last page of things written down. Misdiagnosing friends. I need to tell you about the danger of it. I know it's fun to be like, ooh, are they a narcissist? Are they No, don't do that. Because imagine you're telling somebody what you think they have and they're in a very, very vulnerable headspace and they start stressing, do I have bipolar? Am I schizophrenic? Don't do it. The only time that you can diagnose someone is when you have a master's in psychology. I can't even do it with my bachelor's right now. You need a master's to be a therapist. You need a master's to diagnose someone. And please don't diagnose people in your real life. That's just not nice. Don't do it.
Yeah.
Don't go around talking about your friends behind their back like they might be sadistic. Don't do that. That's just, no. We like to make fun of our exes, but keep mental health out of making fun of your exes. If they didn't have a disorder, I mean, even if they do, don't talk about it, but if they didn't have a disorder, definitely don't say they might have one.
Yeah.
Because you could think someone's a narcissist, but they're really just a shit human being. Like, that could just be the fact of it.
Yeah.
Don't buy the DSM-5 unless you go into the psych field. I have it because of my degree. I was originally going to show you guys the book. I'm not going to.
Yeah, it's
because I don't want you to buy it. I don't want you to buy it unless you have a bachelor's or a master's or you are in college classes in the psych field. Go ahead and buy it. But don't buy it if you're not going into psych because first of all, it's $70. My sister was so generous for that. Second of all, it's like you're going to start diagnosing people and we just talked about you don't want to do that. So just don't buy that.
Yeah.
Stop using psych things as slang. This is the last thing I need to talk about.
Yeah.
Narcissistic abuse and narcissistic abuser. You cannot throw those things around.
Yeah, you can't throw them around baseless.
I was in a relationship that was narcissistic abuse and a narcissistic abuser. The person that upset me the most was Gabby Hanna throwing this around.
Mm. Because she was going through it when she was throwing it around too, but still.
It was not appropriate. Even if you're going through it, it is not appropriate. it is never appropriate to throw those things around.
And the other thing with Gabby, too, is she was using it as an attack on someone.
Exactly.
She wasn't stating it as this person is for a fact this. It was her opinion that this person was a narcissistic abuser when they were not.
Yeah.
Shout out Rachel Oates, by the way. That's who she was talking about when she said it. She's a phenomenal content creator. She's really, really great. I highly recommend her.
And again, even if you're using it using it as an attack is worse, but even if you think someone hasn't used it, that's still bad.
Yeah. It's just not fair.
Calling someone a narcissist, like I just said, not appropriate. Yeah. Gaslight. Stop throwing around gaslight.
Yeah, not everything is gaslight.
I was gaslit in my last relationship before this healthy one. The one that we made like 6 parts on. I was gaslit into that one. Please go watch those videos to find out what gaslight is.
Yes, please.
Bipolar. And I don't mean the weather's bipolar. You can say that. I don't mean that. Yeah. I'm talking about saying a person is acting bipolar. Do not do that. Schizophrenic. Calling someone that because you think they're crazy.
Yeah, that's not...
That has been something that I was called that in Matt Rife's comments on the video that I was featured in on Matt Rife's TikTok. We're not going to talk about that.
Yeah.
And like...
Yeah, I don't think we'll ever do a video about that either.
Someone that I was talking about, someone that I was talking to on Bumble, I was telling them how I saw a demon in my closet because, if you know, I used to have a demon in my closet sent by...
Yeah.
The ex-boyfriend, the gremlin.
Yeah.
And
if you've watched those videos, you know.
And he said, "Are you sure you're not schizophrenic?" It wasn't coming from a caring place. It was coming from a, "Are you sure you're not schizophrenic?" Like, and that type of tone.
And there's a different way to say that if you actually care about a person. Like, there's a way to approach it and be like, I don't know if that's like, are you sure it wasn't something else? Like, it's not like you'll just go, are you schizophrenic? Like, no, that's not how you approach that conversation.
Hey, I've noticed some changes in you. Is everything okay? Like, bring it up kind of like that.
Yeah. There's always a way to go about it that's better than that. But also, it was a man, so are we surprised? No.
Now...
Obviously. Shout out to the men that actually give a fuck, by the way. Shout out to you. We know the difference.
Yes.
When and I will say, I do this a lot. I bullshit on men and I say they're all idiots and fucking stupid because a lot of them are. But I know it's not all of you. Yes. I know it's not the guys that watch this channel. I really freaking hope not. Yeah. But, so when I say, like, all men, I don't mean literally every single one. I mean the stereotypical most, just FYI. Because I probably will say that a lot, because I do say that a lot in my real life.
So, obviously I had a lot written down here. We didn't get into everything. Like I said, if there's a certain theorist that you want to know more about, you can obviously go on Google Scholar and read a bunch of articles about them, form your own opinions of these people. I hate Freud, but you might like him. We can't talk if you do.
There's a whole situation about Freud.
Anyway, now I'll do kind of like what she did last week. I'll ask her if she has any questions.
Honestly, I don't. That was a lot. That was, like, because that, for me, going into it, like, I know a lot of the basic stuff. Yeah. Like, a lot of the, like, I know what each thing means, but I don't know, like, how to talk about it scientifically. So hearing about it, like, all the scientific definitions and all that kind of stuff, that was pretty cool.
Yeah, we weren't going into factor analysis. I literally fell asleep during those classes.
Yeah, screw that.
Yeah, so, anyway, I hate math. Math is abusive.
Math sucks.
So that is basically all that I have. Again, like we did last week, if you want to know anything about marketing, go over to her social media, which will be down below. If you want to know anything about psychology, you can go to mine that are down below. They're always down below in every video. So even if you want to talk about some other video, you can also message either of us.
Also if you have like topics you want us to cover.
Yeah, like, just let us know that you're from the channel.
Yep.
Or you can always go to the email and do it that way. I will give her the login to the email so that she can access it as well. But now that I'm opening that line of communication, you guys can do all that and everything.
You can reach us a variety of ways is what we're saying.
Yeah, so
we're around.
That's all you need to know about psychology. I did write a lot more than I said. Again, there's a lot to it, and I didn't know what was important and what wasn't. Actual filming, I realized I didn't need to say everything that I wrote.
Yeah, there's also a lot of like another part of psychology that we didn't get to is the psychology of marketing itself. I don't know if you would have gone into that in your classes, but we went into that a lot in mine. Like kind of how it works and everything. So if you want a video about that too, we can we can kind of talk about how that works.
We were more clinical psychology in my classes because that's what the classes were for.
Yeah.
But then when I go into my master's program, that'll be more school psychology. So
Yep.
Then I'll find out about that. But yeah, so that is all we were here to talk about today. Hope you guys have a good week, month, year, however long it's been. And again, hit me up if you have any questions. And there were a couple studies I couldn't talk about because they were awful. But again, look up studies if you're interested in research psych.
Mm-hmm.
And so thanks for diving into the tea with us.
Yeah, thanks guys. Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers to you guys. Woo!